What is going on, everyone? My name is Boit, and today we are going to be talking about macro in Age of Mythology Retold. So, let's get into it. With the most important thing here, as with every single RTS game, it is getting your economy going. And how do we do this? We make villages. The beautiful thing about Age of Mythology Retold is that this is done automatically for you. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to do anything silly like having to kind of like go around and just constantly check your town center to make sure you're building villages. You can simply just do this. And that is using Alt Q to auto queue your villagers out. Now, you can also just right click this portrait and you're good to go. Now, if you want and you're just a single player, you can also use this on military as well, or in custom games, or in quick play. You can use auto queue as well on military by just simply right clicking on whatever you want to train out. So you can do the same concept with everything. Now, to continue along with this, I just want you to check. There's somewhere to look on the screen here that's really important, and it's this very top left corner here. This is called the global queue, and you're going to be able to notice that when you've got resources here, that unit it's going to keep training. Now, if it doesn't, you have to go and fix that somewhere. So always be checking that left corner and making sure that your villagers are coming out. That's probably the most important thing. Lots of top players will do this like a little bit more subconsciously by opening their town center up kind of like this and checking to make sure that it's training. But you can just constantly just be checking up on that military panel there to make sure things are going there. Alrighty. I also want to go through some of the other civilizations. Now, Egyptian is exactly the same as the Greeks, and Atlanteans is very, very similar to the Greeks. The civilization that's different is the Norse. So let's jump into what that looks like. Okay, so Norse have got gatherers, dwarves, and obviously there's a berserk in here, but we don't need to care about that. So the basic premise here is that the dwarves are better on gold, the gatherers are better on berries and on trees, or on food and on trees. Now, a real easy general rule of thumb here is you get your build order and you get out 4 dwarves in the classical age. You can find those build orders kind of anywhere at this point. I'm pretty sure I have one from way back at the launch of Retold that is effectively the standard Thor, or not Thor, but Norse build order. You get a 4-minute advance time and 4 dwarves. Now, the way that I see it is for Odin, Loki, and Freyr, you really only need about 5 dwarves on gold in the early stages of the game. The rest of your gatherers want to be going onto food and or wood, depending on what you're building. If you're building throwing axemen, or if you're building, well, I guess not throwing axemen, you put them over onto food, right? Everything else costs food. So yeah, the question is, well, when do I start building my dwarves? And the answer is effectively, well, when you need to start getting more gold income, which is going to be in the heroic age. And the way that you do that is you just either get another town center and you start building dwarves. Then you get some gatherers, you throw them over onto gold. They're actually not that inefficient on gold here. You'll see once they get over there, I can show you. They're actually not that efficient on gold. As you can see here, this one's at 0.81. A dwarf is going up to 1.06. So it's a little bit behind the dwarf, but it's going to be able to help you not float an insane amount of gold, and actually your gold mine's going to last longer. You're actually going to get out of a lot of places by doing this. A lot of tricky situations by doing this. Your gold mine's going to last for longer, and it's going to be a better way to play, in my opinion. That's my tips here for Norse. And yeah, using that global queue is going to be really, really important there. So the next question is, well, how many villages do we make? So basically every civ has got a maximum of 100 villages, and that's a combination for Norse of both dwarves and gatherers. So you can only get 100 total civilian units, or 100 population of civilian units. With Atlanteans, you can get 50 civilians, but that's 100 population there. So effectively, you want to max out on this every single game. And when you get to the late game, you're going to be getting trade caravans as well. So that's going to be 100 villages plus around 50 to 60 caravans to boot. So you might want to start trimming back on that amount. Now, the late game for me is defined as having every single upgrade that you want to have. So maybe you're not going to be building any cavalry in the late game for whatever reason. So maybe you can skip out on that. But you are going to be wanting every single armory upgrade, every single line upgrade, which is like champion infantry, champion archers. You're going to be wanting to have every economic upgrade. So once you've every building upgrade, etc., every age upgrade. Now, once you've got all of that, you're in the late game, and you can start thinking about trimming. The way that you can kind of work out exactly how much you want to trim is, well, you look at how many resources you've got and you start trimming, and you can start manually queuing villages back up in that late game if you don't have enough. That's basically it. Next on the sort of chopping block is your build order. This is really, really important. If you don't have a build order, that's probably the first port of call. Now, for me, I don't really care about the super intricate build orders anymore. I did for a while and I was like, yay, I'm getting out 20, 30 more resources than my opponents, so that's advantage for me. The one thing that I've realized is that myself and everyone else, including the very best players, the Mister, even in other games like the very top level in Age of Empires 2 players like Hera, the Viper, these guys are macroing insanely well, but they're not macroing to the point that they've got 0 resources in the bank ever. It's like they've got 30 resources in the bank at this point, or they've got 80 resources, or they've got 120 resources, or they've got 200 resources in the bank. It's very, very rare that anyone is able to macro perfectly. So I don't care if I'm 50 resources behind my opponent in the early game. What I care about is that I have the right stuff when I need the right stuff. So for example, an important building like a monument, or an important upgrade like pickaxe, or a town center started by a certain point in the game. These things are really important. So when you're deciding what build order you want to learn, think about what you want to accomplish in that build order, and then go and learn the build that gets you that. So do you want to go for a fast second town center? Do you want to go for aggressive play? Do you want to go for like a sort of fancy favor sort of opening where you get a lot of myth units out or something like that? All of those things have that thought process when you're deciding what build order you want to go for, and then do that. And that's also going to get you things up very efficiently to start building your units, and it's going to be a really, really nice way to start the game. So next thing is, when do I get my upgrades? Well, for this is incredibly detailed. So I would actually recommend watching my Fundamentals series, at the very least, the one where I play against the legendary AI. I'll link that in the description box below. But effectively, my current sort of understanding of which upgrades to get when is going to be effectively unique eco upgrades are better than standard eco upgrades, are better than line eco upgrades, which is your medium infantry, medium archers, medium cavalry, is greater than your unique military upgrades, things like Sarissa or Thundering Hooves or Mithril Breastplate, which is then greater than just armory upgrades in general. Now, there is some sort of mathematical reasoning to go for the first line of armory upgrades, your copper weapons, copper armor, copper shields, over getting your line upgrades first. But for the vast majority of players, this isn't going to matter that much. Just get the line upgrades and then get the armory upgrades, and you're going to be golden. And the more you do this and the more you understand when to get these, the more you can start saying, well, I can actually delay this upgrade, for example. Maybe I'm going to delay my my bow saw upgrade, and I'm going to grab this upgrade instead. And you can sort of get there. But a great rule of thumb is that ordering first and then work it out. And then as you play more, you can start experimenting with breaking the rules a little bit, so to speak. All right, let's talk about when to make military buildings. So you can follow a build order for the early game, but things get out of hand really, really quickly, especially when you're not doing things super efficiently like the top players. So an easy way to get a feel for when things are going awry is when either A, you start floating resources, or B, you start being able to queue multiple units into a building. Now, a general rule of thumb for this is if you ever see a number in your military building, that probably means it's time to build some more military buildings. And so, yeah, that's the general rule. You generally want 0 numbers, and you just want to be building your units as they pop out. Okay, so the other thing is, okay, if you miss a training cycle, it's not the end of the world. You're going to be able to basically just do this thing, and you're going to notice, oh, I missed a training cycle. I'm floating resources. Let me cancel this and let me just get my extra buildings down. And it doesn't really matter if we miss training cycles. What matters is if we're floating resources. So this means, okay, well, we've screwed up a little bit. Maybe we're a little bit behind where our opponent potentially could be, but let's throw down an extra couple of buildings. Let's get those resources spent, and let's catch up to our opponent. Now, the next part of this is, okay, how do I select my buildings, and how do I actually train them, practically speaking? Well, there's 2 ways to do this. You can either select all your military buildings and then use a control group. As you can see up here, I've got my control group on 1 here for my longhouses. You can use whatever one you want, or alternatively, you can use the select all military building hotkey. So for longhouse, you can use S, right? For default to select all of your barracks. But I would recommend to change this to just Control S, or if you want to use my hotkey, Control B, to select all of your military buildings. And that's a way to not need to use these pesky control groups if you don't want to for your military buildings. There's no real advantage over using control groups versus using Control B. In fact, I would argue that maybe using the select all military building has a little bit more advantage, because you're never going to forget to add a military building to your control groups. That being said, there is some benefit to using a control group on a side building that you might want to build something specific later in the game. So if you get into like the upper echelons of play, getting used to using control groups such that you can have multiple different control groups of barracks that you might want to be building throughout the game. So it's like, I want to make sure if I've got a barracks down in this position, I want to be building out of this to hit this gold mine or something like that. You can do that. Though I would argue that even in those situations, it's easier just to do this. So which brings me to when do we just train units with 1 keystroke, or when do we start using shift to train? Well, basically, whenever you've got about 4 or 5 longhouses, start using shift. Before then, build with a tap on each, and you have perfect control over everything. That's the easiest way to go about it. So I guess the next question is, okay, so I know how to build units. What units do I build? Well, effectively, the most important thing is to scout what your opponent's doing. If they are building cavalry, well, you want to build infantry. If they are building archers, well, you want to build cavalry. If they are building infantry, you want to build archers. It's pretty much that simple. There are definitely going to be some army compositions that players can make where you go, well, I've got all the counter units, why aren't I winning? And that's going to come down to some experience there. And another thing you can kind of do is, well, some civilizations really lean into a certain type of unit. So for example, Loki really leans into Herser, for example. So if you know this, you can kind of go, or at least if you notice this and you say, well, it seems like every time I play against this civ, they're only building this unit. Well, you can start using that to your advantage, and you can kind of start preparing for that unit a little bit earlier. That being said, players will start throwing curveballs at you, so it is important to just confirm that's what they're doing and then continue to counter that, rather than just blindly doing it and then get surprised by a whole bunch of throwing axemen instead of a whole bunch of Herser, and you've built all the infantry units and then all your infantry units die. So yeah, scouting, super important, and reacting. Yeah, you can always open with whatever you want to kick the game off, but if your opponent scouts you and they react immediately before they build anything, they're going to be at the advantage. So you need to be consistently changing your unit composition to counter what your opponent's doing. All right, let's move on. So the next one is going to be macro versus micro. And what I mean by this is effectively making sure that your economy is working seamlessly versus making sure that your army is working at max efficiency. Now, to be completely honest, for the vast majority of people, the micro doesn't really matter. Watching your army is probably going to do more harm than good. And simply clicking a move and then maybe making sure that your hero is attacking a myth unit is all you really needed to do. for the vast majority of players. Maybe even the hero on a myth unit is not that important. What is important is making sure that your villagers are gathering, that your houses are built and you have that population space, and that your buildings are producing units. If that's all sorted out, then you can start thinking about micro. And this is an easy way to go about this. The idea is to fight on your own terms. If your opponent is coming to attack you and you're out here in the middle of the map, right? And you have a whole bunch of villages here kind of sitting out over here, and your population is at 65 of 65, right? And you go, okay, well, instead of taking this fight and not being able to do anything, I'm just going to run. I'm going to fix my villages. I'm going to build myself the house, and we're going to call it a day. And then we're going to fight. Right? So fight on your own terms. That's going to be a great way to go about it. Now, when it gets into micro is its own topic in of itself, but a really maybe obviously simple way to explain it would be make sure that the units that you have are attacking the units that they counter. So yeah, cavalry on archers, infantry on cavalry, archers on infantry, heroes on myth units, and myth units not on heroes. Anything but on heroes. They're actually decent enough at killing enemy myth units as well, so that can be another thing you can do. All right, so next thing is, when do we get town centers? So basically, you're either going to get a town center within the first minute or two of hitting the classical age, or you get some damage done and then get a town center. The effective statement that I've loved and I've always followed is, when you're ahead, get more ahead. So effectively this means, well, a town center costs somewhere around 900 to 1,000 resources, maybe 700 to 1,000 resources, depending on what civilization you're playing. When you account for build time, walk time, and the actual resource costs. For example, Norse doesn't really cost any more than the 350 here for the town center. Egyptians cost 550 gold, but it does cost the villager build time and a pharaoh, so that's going to take some resources off there. And Greeks cost the 700 as well, plus the villager build time, so it's closer to 900 or 1,000, depending on how many villagers you put on the town center. So you need to get that much damage dealt before you drop that town center. Otherwise, your opponent is going to have that much more stuff than you, and they're going to be able to take a fight and kill you. And then, or do more damage to you than your town center is going to pay it off. So what does this mean? Well, either you kill off a villager, and then every villager you kill off, that's every minute that passes somewhere in between 50 to 60 resources that they've got less of than you. Or it means sniping enemy units or winning a big fight and having units left over. And that amount of the units left over is going to be what you can then invest into something that's not military, because you've already got that stuff, your opponent doesn't, so you can get a bigger advantage some way. Now, one thing to keep in the back of your mind is that a town center does take around 5 minutes to pay itself off. This is accounting for the cost of the villagers that you need to purchase, how long it takes for the villager to pay itself off, and then obviously the 700 to 1,000 resources that it costs to build the town center, and that comes back. The math is about 5 minutes, give or take, right? So use that as your barometer there for when the town center is paid off and when you're like actually in front. And you get in front really, really quickly at that point. You get a big advantage moving forward from there. And now another option here is, instead of getting the town center, you could tech up. Now, teching up means you get to the next age, or you grab a whole bunch of military technologies. Now, jumping age takes less time to pay off, but gives you less than a town center in the long run. And getting military upgrades, it helps nearly immediately, and it can be turned into a huge advantage, but it also can actually just do nothing if your opponent can defend what you're throwing at them. So you got to make that decision in the game and live with the consequences, learn from the consequences, and make better decisions in the next game. So yeah, I'm not going to be able to go too much in depth on that, but those are your options, and it's good to know. All right, so next up here is farms. effectively, I don't want to farm if I've got hunt left. I don't want to farm if I've got chickens left. I don't want to farm if I've got goats left. I want to farm maybe while I'm on these goats. So if we have some villagers here on the goats, effectively we probably, these are at 300, so this is as much food as we're going to get. But effectively, as we're on these goats, I want to maybe start getting some farms in. Now, the best way to build these farms is you just hover your mouse over the town center and then click. There's no need to click in a specific spot because it's going to do it automatically for you, right? And it's going to just go everywhere and you're good to go. You don't have to think about it. All the farms are in and you're good. The most efficient farm placement is this windmill pattern as well, so it's not giving you anything wrong. Farms in these spots, farms in these spots are inefficient, and sure, you can use them, but it would be better to not. If you have, say, a granary or an ox cart somewhere, you can use that to build onto this, and you can have a nice little box of farms here for the ox cart or on a granary or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But let's actually talk about the moments where it's in the middle of the game and you don't have time to set this up. What's the easiest way to do this? Well, the easiest way is you just grab yourself the 8 villages, count in your head to 8, and click 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you're good to go. And these villages will automatically start going to the correct farm, so you don't even have to worry about it. As Atlantean, you don't need to build farms around your town center. They are more than happy to farm over here, or over here, or over here, or over here, or over here. Now, the obvious benefit of having your villages around your town center is that they're going to be safe there. You can garrison them easily. I argue that the best place to put your villages is actually near your towers around the outsides, if they're close. And your town center here, as Atlanteans, might be best to literally just have military buildings on them like this. Because this way that your opponent can't just run in and kill your town center without significant losses sustained by needing to kill off these buildings, right? So, yeah, it doesn't really matter where. And on top of this, you don't really need a farm transition as Atlantean. Because let's say we just finished eating these... Go away, UFOs. Let's say you just finished eating these goats and there's no food left and you've got no wood in the bank. Well, easy, simple solution is right-click on this tree, keep playing. Sure, you've got no food income at this point, but then you throw your farms down. And you go back to your play. Okay, now come back, put more farms down. So it's, and you can see that the villages, they don't have to move anywhere, so it's pretty efficient, it's pretty nice, and all the other good stuff. So that's my tips there. Though, you know, a farm transition is probably going to be your best bet most of the time. All right, the next part here is going to be trade routes. So when do you want to start a trade route? How do you want to start a trade route? And all the other good stuff that happens there. So effectively, your best bet in a trade route is the corner of the map going all the way to the town center as far away from you as possible. There's not really a better way to do it than that. Another thing here is when you build your trade route, you want to make sure that you've actually walled it. Otherwise, this is where you lose games, because we're about to get to it. You do this because you really only want to start trading when there's no gold mines left on the map. Or maybe when you've got about 6k to 12k gold remaining on the map. Now, let's say these gold mines are gone. This gold mine, I'm on this gold mine and on this gold mine. Yeah, it's time to start a trade route. Now, you can go ahead and do this and just get yourself several markets up. There's no problems here. And this is the quickest way to start your trade route going. And another trick here is you can select all your markets and you can right click on the market as far away from your town center as possible. And then you can just start your trade, and all of these markets are going to be immediately tasked over to this town center. So you don't have to do anything special there. Now, I have seen some players going for maybe like one market somewhere in the kind of mid-mythic age, or maybe even the heroic age if they're absolutely insane, but definitely mythic age is something I have seen. But you just have to be a little bit careful to not go too far up on those, because then you don't have room for your military, right? Okay, so the next question would be, what about military buildings? Where do we build? Not at military. The next question is going to be, where do we build our defensive structures? Where's the best place to build a castle? Where's the best place to put towers? Well, I would say, effectively, castles, they are for gold mines. And probably not much more than gold mines. You can put them on a town center that's under attack, but if you... That is not going to happen. If you put these on all of these gold mines here, you have secured them for yourself. And it means if I've got myself 6 citizens over here, then they will be protected because I've got 20 garrison space for this palace. If my opponent ever wants to come and raid me here, it's not a problem. I'm good to go with a garrison, and they're completely fine. So that's basically where you put your stuff. Now, as for towers, I would say once you hit the late game, once you've got every single upgrade and you're at full population, now it's time to think about towers. And the way to use towers is, let's say our opponent's got this town center here secured. I'm sieging it. Well, basically, I'm going to put my towers basically all here. And I'm just going to be dropping these here, get all my upgrades for these, make sure that I've also, you have your armory as well, right? And these towers will hit fairly strong here with all of these upgrades in the end of the day. 14.4 pierce with 16 towers shooting down, and I can put my siege on this spot as well. If we grab our upgrades here, let's just put this here. And this guy here would be able to start sieging down this town center with some protection from those towers and everything else. So that's basically where you want to put your towers. You can use towers in the classical age, if necessary, as a substitute for a palace there to defend your villages in that sort of a situation. It's going to be very rare, but it could be the case that you're having a very, very messy classical age fight and you want to protect your villages from raids. These towers, they do have the bonus of having 10 population space in them to garrison, and all these villages here can simply just get in there and they're safe from the raids. Plus there's decent amounts of HP. These are obviously very, very upgraded, but you know, 750 HP or whatever they are at base is pretty decent, and it's going to let you react to the raid at the very least and not lose all your citizens immediately. So it's a decent idea. And even in the heroic age, if you don't have enough resources for a palace, this is another option to go for. And then finally, as for walls, you can see how I walled here. Effectively, you just want to use the natural environment that the game has given you and find little choke points that you can wall off. So between this cliff and this body of water, over here between the forest and the body of water, between the forest and the cliff here, or a forest and a forest and a cliff. You can even use your own building here to a forest if you like. That's completely fine. So any sort of choke point here on the map is wallable, and the more walls you put down, probably the more safe you're going to be in a game. All right, so another little trick here is going to be Shift Q. How does Shift Q work? What do you want to do with Shift Q? So let's just say we're on this hunt here, right? And all the hunt has been eaten. This is the last bit of hunt here. I'm just going to get a bunch of citizens here so they start grabbing this as fast as possible, right? Okay, well, that'll do. Okay, so what we would do here is once this giraffe finishes, we want the villagers to do something. Now, if we notice this is about to end, which we may or we may not, it doesn't really matter. Your villager is going to go on idle anyways, and you're going to have to get them back over here. But if we notice it's about to finish, we can say, oh, okay, well, it's going to finish. Let's move them straight over to the chickens. And they will move straight over to the chickens, and you're good to go. So you can do this on gold mines. You can do this on wood lines. You can do this on food. And it's a really, really great way to kind of control your economy so that you never get any idle time. And to some degree here even, you can do this super early on. So I've got 4,500 left here. I could say, oh, I want to go over here. And you can just get that set up nice and early so you don't get that idle time and you're not losing out on anything. Just be careful if you do this super in advance, your villagers might walk straight into an enemy army and you might lose them all. But yeah, that's a thing. One other cool little trick you can do is you can get yourself resources that drop into a different type of building. So here, for example, playing as... Actually, I'll do it with both of these, right? Here, for example, playing as Isis, I can drop wood into a granary. As you can see here, the wood's going to go in. And I can drop wood into a mining camp. And you'll see that my wood will come up here as well. Now, where people go wrong with this, as that drops in there, and you can get yourself that pickaxe. Where people go wrong with this is they come over here and they build their mining camp, and then they shift click onto the gold mine. So this villager here has got 2 wood carried, and shift clicking onto the gold mine is going to mean that this villager here has another action. So it's going to be holding... Oh, never mind. It looks like that got fixed. Fantastic. We don't need to put that in there. Well, it turns out you can shift click, so maybe we will leave this in here. Okay. So you don't have to worry about that. It's fixed. Happy days. All right. So I'm sorry, guys. Unfortunately, here we come to fishing. Fishing is very important. On a map like Anatolia, both players spawn with 9 fish on each side here, which makes 18 fish. Now, 18 fish is roughly the amount of fish that you can get while also getting yourself a 5 to 5 minute 15 classical age. So effectively, with that sort of a classical age, there's not really a whole lot of aggression that a player can do that can kill you, and they're not going to be able to do enough damage that your fishing economy you've got is not kind of accounted for. There's really not a no fish build order that works. There might be some strategies that can be cheesy and catch someone off guard, but it's very easy to scout that sort of thing. So I wouldn't recommend going down that path. Instead, if you don't like to fish, or you don't like the naval combat, if you don't like the naval combat, I would recommend just building your fishing ships and then rushing, or building your fishing ships and then getting town centers and just saying, okay, if you want to kill my fish, go for it. I don't care. I'm getting something else. So you're investing into killing something that I don't care about. And I'm going to be getting my economy going anyway. So we're going to be on an equal footing to some degree. This is obviously not going to work all the way up to the upper echelons of gameplay at the very top level, but for the vast majority of games, this is going to give you an advantage. So my recommendation is follow a build order, get to the classical age at around 5 minutes to 5 minutes and 30, have 4 to 6 docks depending on what civilization you are, and you can also do this little trick here. If you've only got, say you've got only enough for 2 docks and you don't have enough to build another dock down here, you could drop a granary on this spot here so that the fishing ships are going to drop in. So you can do that as well. There's no problems. Fishing ships drop into the granaries. They drop into ox carts. Totally fine. All right. So next one is relics. They're really important. To what degree they are important depends on the relic. Now, effectively, if the relic boosts your economy in any way, I recommend picking it up. If the relic boosts a military unit in any way, like right here, ranged soldiers, hit points plus 10%, I'd recommend picking it up. If you get any sort of cheaper something, I'd recommend picking it up. If it does something that you don't think is very good, personally, you can skip it. So you can use your own sort of sense of, well, this relic's good, this relic's not so good. And especially if it's good for your own civilization, your own strategy, you can prioritize that over another one. I haven't done a relic tier list. I know there are relic tier lists out there. If you guys want me to do a relic tier list, definitely leave a comment and tell me to get my act together and get one out there. But, you know, there is definitely relics that are really, really good. Very, very great for certain civilizations. For example, Tusk of the Iron Boar is a 10% boost to cavalry HP for a civilization like Poseidon, or for Odin, who really likes to build raiding cavalry, or Hippias, right, respectively. Getting that relic is going to be really, really important to their success. So you can definitely figure out which ones are good for your civ based on knowing what your civ is good at. So yeah, basically pick up the relics. Don't leave them there. Every civ has got their own way to get them. For Atlantean, I do recommend heroizing a Oracle and getting yourself those relics. For Egyptian, I recommend getting Hands of the Pharaoh and using your Priest, so you can get that out of the temple. Obviously, Greek and Norse, you have to build your hero. The Hersa is probably the slowest one to get out onto the map and get relics. Greek Jason or whatever here builds in 5 seconds. So you just have to get the temple and then Jason out and you can go out and get that one. You've also got Bolt if you want to use that. But nonetheless, that is the secret there. Next, I want to talk a little bit about favor before we finish up here. Well, the last thing I want to talk about is effectively on favor. So every civ is different. So we'll take them one by one. Greek. Temple. Put a villager on this temple here from the start of the game, effectively. As soon as you build this temple as Greek, you should just leave a villager on the temple. There is... The only time I would say to take the villager off the temple would be if you're going for a naked far second town center. Why? Well, maybe that villager here getting the extra 60 resources a minute is going to be worth more in that moment than the favor income that you can get from it. After that, after the town center is up, put the villager back onto the temple. You should have one villager on the temple 100% of the time, with the exception of that one small thing. And even then, I might argue that putting the town center up slightly later and having the favor is more important. When do we put more villagers on favor? This is super rule of thumb. You can do it however you like. The maximum amount of villagers I want to see on a temple as Greek for myself is going to be 8, which is the same amount of favor income as Uranus, with 8 oracles out on the map at max efficiency. So it's really, really good. That's Zeus, right? Or Hades, Poseidon with golden apples. That's the Aphrodite unique technology boosting your favor income available in the temple. So between 1 and 8. Now, if you've got no gold mines left on the map, or you're floating a ton of resources and you just need favor, sure, put 20 villagers on favor for a moment. But don't leave them on there for the entirety of the game. It's better to just, once you've got that second plenty vault or third plenty vault, however many you think is enough, just delete the villagers and get the pop space for your military. Yeah. So effectively 8 villagers on favor once you're at 100 villagers, and maybe you can put 2 villagers on favor, 3 villagers on favor, 4 villagers on favor based on having 10 villagers out, maybe 20 villagers out for 1 villager, 30 villagers out for 2 favor. Those sorts of rules of thumb here are pretty good, but effectively, do I want to build more myth units right now or not? That's the question you want to ask yourself, and the answer should normally be yes. So put more villagers on favor to afford them. Okay. Next is Egyptian. You want to have 1 monument. Every single build order for Egyptian should have at least 1 monument in it in your opening build order for the Archaic Age. If you're not getting a monument and a Classical Age, this is arguably incorrect. I don't think I've seen a single build that doesn't get a monument that is any good. The only thing I thought of would be a 3:30 advance time, or maybe a 3:15 advance time with an immediate second town center and then your monument. So at the very least, you're getting monuments up. So I would recommend just learning 1 with a monument. So the question is, when do I build 2 monuments? Well, or when do I build my 3rd monument or my 4th monument? Effectively here, the earlier the better. If I want a 4-minute advance time, maybe I'm going to throw that second monument up while I'm going to the Classical Age. If I want a far second town center, I'm going to throw that second monument up after I get that town center down. Or arguably, it might be better to just get the 2 monuments and maybe get a myth unit out so you can defend yourself while getting that town center up. 3rd monument, if I'm classical fighting, I'm probably throwing this down before I go heroic age, maybe even earlier. If I go for a fast heroic, maybe just 2 monuments, or sorry, if I go for a 1 town center fast heroic, I want 3 or maybe even 4 monuments before I do that. If I go for a fast second town center into a fast heroic age, I'm probably thinking about dropping that second monument after the second town center and that 3rd monument while I'm advancing to the heroic age. As you can see, I highly value favor with Egyptians. I think their myth units are insanely strong, and I think you need to be building them. The 4th monument, you could probably build before you go to the Mythic Age. So when you're starting to think, oh, it's time to go Mythic Age, just get your 4th monument down, call it a day. 5th monument, I would say it's ridiculously expensive. I'll just show you what that is now. Here it is, 700, 700. It does give you double the favor, but it is more than double the cost. And at that point, I'm sort of asking myself, probably better to just spend it on all of my upgrades first and just get it in the late game. Like after you get all the upgrades you need, then throw this monument down. It might even be better to just get a Signature of the Titans and then get that 5th monument. You know, it's very expensive. Okay, so Norse is next. All right, so Norse is very, very simple. Herser, train favor. They do not give you 1 favor a second. They give you 0.01 favor a second. If you have 10 of these, that's equal to a monument. So I would say pretty much every single game, anyways, you want to get out a handful of Herser as you go to the classical age. This is going to give you a little bit of favor to play with. So probably 3 Herser at a minimum per game, just to give you that favor trickle to help you out. Everything else is just going to come in naturally with fighting. Now, if you kill off a chicken, you'll notice you get favor. You can see up here, favor coming up. So chickens, herdables, give favor. Do I have any herdables? I do. Okay, so yes, the pigs as well are going to give you some favor here. So it's well worth going for this and killing these early if you have a specific technology you want to go for, or a specific myth unit. See, this is 18 favor. If you kill all the chickens and maybe some pigs, you might be able to get a second Valkyrie out really early, and that could help you defend against some early rushes. Another thing here is, let me get some extra villagers. Killing off an aggressive animal here is going to give me favor as well. So this one here, I'm at 85. I'm shooting now, I'm at 86. And I'm at 87, 88. So you can see that you definitely do get some favor here. However, so if I drag a aggressive animal under my town center and I use my town center to shoot it, you can see I'm at 90 favor or 60,090. And I drag this in and I kill this Orc, I get 0 favor for it. So if it's at all possible to not shoot the animal with your Norse build order, I'd recommend to do that. I'd recommend to make the effort and just take less food income. Obviously, the town center is going to help you kill the animal faster, but just take less food income and get the favor yourself. Because that way, the early game, Norse just doesn't have favor. So you've got to do these tricks to give yourself the extra favor for the myth units to help you defend against any early stuff and actually allow you to take some early fights. I think this is a secret for Norse to really help them out in the early game that is a little bit lackluster used. Sometimes we see players doing this to get like unique upgrades. Say, for example, this upgrade here might not be a terrible upgrade to get some of the time test Rumnir, or maybe getting Thundering Hooves nice and early. But, you know, grabbing out a second Valkyrie really early, and all of a sudden I can heal my Valkyrie, or I can raid 2 different places on the map straight away. That's a really, really good opening idea. I'm just coming up with this stuff now. Don't ask me how this stuff comes in, but it turns out when you think about the game, you come up with some ideas. All right. Okay, so next on the chopping block is going to be Atlantean. And I will show you exactly what I think about Atlantean right now. Okay. So, I think, at the very least, with nearly every single build order, with the exception of a naked far second town center, you should get yourself at least 4 oracles while advancing, if not 5, if not 6. 6 might be pushing it. Now, what is good about Atlantean oracles? They are effectively villages, but you don't have to build a town center. So they're expensive villages, but you don't have to build a town center. That's awesome. Absolutely awesome. You have to be taking advantage of this while playing Atlantean, especially because Atlantean civilian units, they do gather a little bit slower than the other civs. Technically speaking, though practically speaking, I think you're actually going to net yourself more resources on average than your opponent does. Nonetheless. Oracles here, the best place for these is honestly looking off into the distance here, into the void, and also what you should probably do here is the oracles that are really far away, if you're playing as Kronos, let's do this. Give himself a little home over here so he can jump in and be fine. You know? Come over here, drop this down. You know? Come over here, drop this down. In your main base here, you probably want 1 oracle kind of on one side and then one oracle on the other side. So that they're not overlapping, and you've got the entirety of this space nice and locked down. And if you see anyone coming in to raid your oracle, you've got a nice retreat path over into the tower. Now, there's another little hotkey worth knowing is backslash, I think, is by default, which is find your scout. And I just click this when I'm building these oracles to make sure that none of them are kind of overlooking each other. Now, if, for example, we turn these all into heroes, right? All of a sudden, they're now going to have even more line of sight. So if this actually ends up happening, we're going to need to move them. So we go through and we go, okay, so these ones are overlapping, so let's move them just ever so slightly, and now everything else is very, very nice. So yeah, that's the secrets there. As Oranos, you can use sky passages as a nice little place there. Build the sky passage in your main base, build the sky passage onto your hunt here. Send an oracle through the sky passage to jump out over here. He's now safe next to the sky passage. Happy days. And as Gaia, you can use the Gaia Lush to help keep the oracle alive, giving him some boosted speed with channels. But the only real way to keep these safe as Gaia is to just build a mana. Send a citizen out there and build a mana. So it might not be a terrible idea, say, to have this oracle, if you're, say, playing as Gaia, on this hunt, and then just send a citizen out there to build a mana and then be on that hunt. And then the oracle's got its home. The citizen's out here eating the hunt, and they can jump over the oak tree. This might not be a bad idea, but for the most part, you can just have the oracles sitting around the map, and you're going to be okay. You're going to be safe. You've also got Caladria as Gaia to kind of keep those alive and safe. Okay. And then I guess the final thing is, how many oracles do you want? Well, I think total 10. However, you don't really need 10. You can't really spend the favor that easily. So maybe 8 is a nice number before going to the mythic age, and then 10 when you're in the mythic age. And never, ever be afraid to throw down a second or a third temple to make these myth units, whether that be Promethean, Promethean, Satyrs, or even making yourself some Argus or Hecagantes. These myth units are really, really big for you because Atlantean's army is kind of weak compared to, say, Greek. The only real way you're going to get through that Greek army as Atlantean is having these myth units. So it is very, very important to be making them and to be supporting your army with them as well. So plus you've also got the god powers, which then leads me into, okay, what do I spend these resources? How do I spend my favor? Effectively, unique upgrades are basically all really worth grabbing. There's very rarely a unique upgrade that's not worth grabbing. Use the above, get eco upgrades or unique eco upgrades first, and then unique military upgrades after that as your sort of barometer of what to buy. And then after that, I would say build myth units before using multiple god powers, with the exception of Atlantean, who gets some very cheap ones here. With this, you can see this is incredibly cheap. Actually, it's not going to... It doesn't want to start boosting itself here. Do I have any other? I don't think I do. Everything else is a hero. Anyways, this does go up very, very slowly, so you can get more of those. But for the most part, if you're not full population, get more myth units. If you are full population, go for it with the with the god powers to use multiple ones of those. No problems with doing that. And I guess if there's anything really important, say for example, a second shifting sands to avoid flaming weapons, you might want to just hold on to that and just make sure your favor never drops below 50, and you've always got that charge available if need be. All right, guys. If you guys enjoyed this one and you feel like it helped, definitely leave a comment, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you want to see more guides like this, let me know what you want to see, and I will endeavor to make something worth watching. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.